Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our neurodiversity webinar about proactive and reactive inclusion. My name is Sophie and I'm the social media and webinar manager for Thrive. And Chezzy Kennedy, our neurodiversity director, is running the session today. If this is your first time joining, these are our new monthly webinars, which will be running every final Wednesday of the month, and they will alternate between mental health and neurodiversity topics. So hopefully they will provide you with some insight, education, and food for thought about how you can support yourself as well as others. They'll all be recorded, so if you do have to dash off early or can't make the sessions, all you need to do is register and it will be sent to you afterwards. If you have any questions throughout the session, please just pop them in the chat box and then we can come to them at the end. So we all know that workplaces need to be inclusive, but which is the best approach to meeting the needs of neurodiverse individuals? Should we be reactive to individuals who ask for accommodations, or should we be proactive and anticipate their needs? I am going to hand you over to Chezzy, who is going to run the session and tell us more about this topic. Over to you, Chezzy.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, let's try the first bit of tech, and it's actually sharing my screen. Here we go. Let's see how we go. So hopefully everybody can see the correct screen. I'm going to rely on Sophie to tell me if you're not seeing anything or not. Okay, here we go. So before we even start, let's just be mindful of this webinar. I know everybody reacts differently to information, how that's processed, and we all have different experiences, backgrounds, thoughts and feelings, and those are all relevant. So if at any point I say anything or you experience anything that has made you feel uncomfortable, please do reach out to us and we will support you with that. We want to make this webinar perfect for everybody to enjoy. And as said, the aim of this webinar is just to get you thinking differently. We certainly want to be making your well-being and your experience more pleasant. We definitely don't be taking anything away from that. You can opt out at any point. Feel free to leave at any time. This webinar is being recorded, so you will receive the recording of that anyway. So please don't worry. And the chat box is there. If anyone's got any questions they want to pop in, then Sophie will be checking those out. Okay. So, and I just start off by saying thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with me. I do appreciate that. And as Sophie's already said, my name is Chezzy and I am the Neurodiversity Training Director for Thrive. And I myself am diagnosed autistic and dyslexic, and I'm very proudly neurodiverse. Over the next 30 minutes, we're just going to have a little chat of why creating a culture of inclusion is really important, particularly when we think about neurodiverse individuals. And in this webinar, I will cover a few facts, but a lot of it is just thoughts. It's just to get you thinking. You don't have to agree with me. You may have your own ways of thinking about things. So that's perfectly okay. And again, if you want to discuss anything, just pop it in the chat. So first of all, let's look at what neurodiversity actually is. So neurodiversity is a new term that maybe some of you have heard of, and it's the understanding that not all brains work in the same way. And it's the idea that neurological differences are natural and should be respected as such. Now, it's a concept that was first used by autism advocate Judy Singer in 1998. So in terms of like new words, it's a relatively new word. And it's kind of an umbrella term that's used to encompass all different brain types of neurological brains. So neurotypical brains, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, and it includes all different variations of intellectual ability and learning styles and the way we emotionally regulate. and the way we respond to sensory sensitivities. So when we think of the word neurodiversity, it literally means all of us. So this is why we really need to be thinking very differently about neurodiversity in the workplace, because it's everybody. It's not about creating a them and us culture. It's about creating an inclusive culture. So we've probably all heard of the term reasonable adjustments, and I'm assuming that you know that there are things that should be put in place as a matter of law, and they are within the workplace as part of adhering to the Equality Act 2010. Now, as stipulated in the Equality Act 2010, it's actually illegal to discriminate against anybody based on a number of different categories, which include race, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Now, within the Equality Act, a disability is defined as a physical or mental condition that has substantial long-term impact of your ability to complete day-to-day activities. And despite the fact that many neurodivergent individuals may not identify as having a disability, they are in fact covered and protected within this definition that's in the Equality Act 2010. So not only is it law to put in place these reasonable adjustments, it's the right thing to do on a human level, to be a kind human being. So we're going to have a bit of a look in more detail at what is all this about. So reasonable adjustments must be unique to the individual person's own challenges and designed to give that person a level playing field within their role so that they can fulfill their true potential. It's no good just coming up with a reasonable adjustment that suits the company or suits an individual, because that's not really complying to it being unique to the person's own challenges. So for some individuals to have the same chance of success as everyone else, there needs to be reasonable adjustments in the workplace. That means things need to be done differently. Now, what is the difference between inclusive workplace and an inclusive culture? So there is a very big difference. An inclusive workplace is kind of reactive in supporting those who need reasonable adjustments or have additional needs. And a workplace with an inclusive culture is proactive in supporting the needs of everyone. So as things are already in place, you automatically feel like you belong. So when we look at reasonable adjustments, there may be a case of changing a job interview process to reduce stress. And again, this is if asked. Creates a quiet space for managing emotions, if asked. Offers assistive technology, sorry, no one wants assertive technology, do they? And providing lumbar supporting chairs, again, if asked. But one of the biggest challenges that employers are currently facing is being able to adhere to the Equality Act by providing reasonable adjustments. And one of the most common things that we hear when we talk to businesses is if people won't declare that they need support, how can we help them? And it's almost as if the businesses are kind of slopey shouldering, saying, well, it's not my problem if no one's told me. And what's really interesting, according to the law firm Fox, there was a 40% rise in employment tribunals relating to autistic individuals, and a 14% rise in tribunals for dyslexia. And this has been in the past year alone. But individuals do not have to declare that they are neurodiverse to be protected by the Equality Act, as some individuals don't even realise that they have a neurodiverse condition. Now, this is super interesting. If an individual makes a numerical mistake and is dismissed for it, and is then able to show that they have dyscalculia, that individual will have grounds to claim unfair dismissal if there were no reasonable adjustments in place to support them. So that's really important to know, that it's not as simple as, well, that employee didn't declare if they didn't know. But what's also important to know is that an individual with dyscalculia will not just have their day impacted by their ability to understand and process numbers and data. Telling the time could be a challenge, managing money. All different things have an impact on the day-to-day life of that individual that they will experience, whether they have an official diagnosis or not. So if anything has been proven that that individual has clearly struggled in some areas of their lives, then they are protected by the Equality Act. So when we think about reactive reasonable adjustments, it doesn't make good business sense, because you are leaving yourself open to employment tribunal. So one of the most common challenges shared by all neurodiverse conditions is the challenge within executive functioning. Now, executive functioning is a mental process that enables a person to focus attention and juggle multiple tasks successfully. Now, a really great visual for understanding executive functioning is to think about this as air traffic control. Now, air traffic control has to respond to lots of information and process lots of instructions in a fast amount of time. If there was no air traffic control, airports would be in absolute chaos. And the same thing happens within the brain, where these cognitive processes are disrupted. They can lead to all sorts of problems in day-to-day function. And there's that word again, day-to-day function. So let's take a look at a short list of proactive reasonable adjustments. And these are super helpful for neurodiverse individuals as they support executive functioning skills. And when an individual feels safe and supported within their environment, the chances of them speaking up and saying, I could do with a bit more support, gets really higher. Gets higher, not really higher. That's not good grammar, is it? So let's have a look. So we've got clear job descriptions. So interview questions that are clear and specific, sent out in advance. Show capability at interview rather than just talking about what you can do. Assistive software available on all devices. Sensory safe environments. Having agendas for all meetings. Simple to read, no jargon policies. All employees shared their preferred communication methods, and there are digital clocks that don't tick. Now, what I want us to do is I want us to look at those proactive reasonable adjustments again, but this time let's look at them not from a neurodiverse individual, but let's look at them as somebody who is extremely worried. You've got a lot going on at home, or maybe you have so much work to do that you feel stressed. Maybe you've been sent an important email that's so long you have to read it. But what if you had access to assistive technology that meant you could listen to that email? What if you've just come out of a very tense meeting and you need a few moments to take a breather in a quiet space to regain your thoughts? What if there was a quiet space available there? So you're in a meeting and you're very conscious that you have to leave at a particular time. Now you have an agenda and you can see the time markers for each point. So you can focus knowing that the meeting will be over long before you need to leave. Maybe English is not your first language. So sometimes it's easier for you to understand instructions in written form rather than spoken. Your line manager knows this, and instead of talking at you and you having to translate and process each word in real time, you have written instructions that you can access and process in your own time when you need to. So straight away, we can see that those proactive, reasonable adjustments for a neurodiverse individual have benefits for everybody, bringing us back to that word neurodiversity, neurotypical and neurodivergent individuals. So a culture of inclusion should include all of us. The more we can put into place as a natural part of an inclusive culture, the better we are all off as a society. Ask questions to your colleagues. What do you need to be successful on your worst day? Now, that's a really, really important question to ask, because it's no good just putting in an accommodation that suits the business, that might suit a few people. Everybody is individual. When we think back to the Equality Act, it has to be individual. So we've already had these conversations within our teams. What do you need on your worst day? Because it's no good having something in place that works when I'm kind of okay, when I'm in a good space. I don't need somewhere to go and collect my thoughts. I don't need something to read emails for me. I don't need somebody to help me put my words in a better, more cohesive sentence. But on my worst day, I need a quiet space. I need to be able to have information in short chunks. And when we are supporting individuals on their worst day, we can support people to achieve far more and feel included. And it's really important that we understand that neurodiverse individuals, they're not disabled by their condition, they are disabled by their environment. And it's such a powerful thing to think about. In fact, just this week, I saw on LinkedIn, there was a post of an Paralympic swimmer in the pool, stood up in front of his wheelchair. And the title was "Disabled by My Environment," because out of the water, that Paralympic swimmer would not be able to stand up out of his wheelchair. Yet change the environment and different things can be achieved. Which is very, very powerful statement once we really, really understand that. That's kind of what I wanted really today to be all about. And I've purposely left some time so we can have questions and anything that's come up, but just to really be inclusive, we need to be proactive and not reactive to situations, because not everybody is comfortable in declaring that they are neurodiverse and need accommodations, but not everybody knows. But we need to be supporting everybody. So before I answer the questions that we have, I just want to give a shout out for our next month's webinar that we will be hosting. It's going to be delivered by the wonderful Joni Ray Anderson, and she's going to be talking about how mental health and creativity, how it all works together, and how it is how our mental health enhances our creativity, which is going to be amazing, because Joni does loads of really cool work with puppets and things like that. So that'll be well worth jumping on board for and registering for that. We will have a link that you can use, so you can sign up for that one as well. If you want to connect with me more, feel free to email me. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and then we can have a chat. I just need to work out how to stop sharing.
We have had a few questions. The first one from Jamie, who says, I worry that as an employer, if someone has needs, there might be costs associated with making adjustments. I'm a new business, so costs are very important at this point. Is there any financial help out there?
Yeah, so the way that it works is all businesses are expected to put in reasonable adjustments, but there are different levels of funding available depending on what size business you have. There's also something called the in return to work
Access to work
package.
is that
Sorry,
access
to work.
Yeah,
that's
someone's mentioned that in the box. So
that's so an individual can contact them. There is a typical government, there is a big long waiting list for that, but you just fill in a form, you say what you need, and they will then pay for you to have assistive technology. If you need other particular accommodations, that's fine. The Equality Act also does protect businesses in that the adjustments have to be reasonable. So if you are a small business and you're in a listed building, for example, with no wheelchair access, it wouldn't be a reasonable adjustment for you to be expected to overcome planning permission to put in wheelchair access for an individual. But if you are a huge business, let's take Network Rail, for example, it wouldn't be okay for them to say, well, we've got no wheelchair access for you in our business, because they are such a huge company that's available. But you'll be surprised when we think of accommodations, the majority of reasonable adjustments that you can put in, particularly for neurodiverse individuals, cost less than £100. And it's more around other creative methods and just asking that individual what works for you.
Yeah, and I popped a link in the chat box to an Instagram post that we did recently with some reasonable adjustments, and a lot of those are, as you can see, they're very much like a process shift rather than actually physically buying something or like paying money to implement something. So that was a great question. Thank you for that. Lisa says, do you think that those who are neurodiverse are more are more of a target for bullying and abuse in the workplace? I have experienced this in every role I have been in throughout my career, and I have just left an organisation due to the bullying and abuse that I've experienced. I've done everything to try and avoid being a target, masking, taking on extra work, fitting in by trying to take part in games and activities, and team building days, which I'm sorry about, which takes a lot out of me as I hate them, but I'm still targeted. I found the only way is to leave and move on to somewhere else. Raising issues with HR internally goes on deaf ears, and in my experience, do you have any help, advice or guidance on this important issue? And yeah, Lisa, I'm very sorry that you've experienced that, because that is not a nice experience for anyone to go through at all. So hopefully Chezzy can shed some light on where you can go to guidance for that.
Yeah, and it is, sadly, there is a huge problem with that. And again, that comes back to why tribunals are going up. One of the interesting things, particularly with autism tribunals, is that is a big factor, because as individuals, we do automatically feel uncomfortable when someone is behaving in a way that's different to what we are used to. And that's just fact. That's the way we've kind of developed our brains. It doesn't mean that it's okay, but what it does mean is that more individuals need to be educated into the idiosyncrasies. There's a really big long word that basically means the weirdness, the weird ways of doing things that us neurotypical individuals can have. But again, the Equality Act, a business is responsible for the conduct of its employees. So if you were to suddenly start being really mean to me and picking on me, if you were being employed by Thrive, well, Thrive have to deal with that. They can't just say, well, that wasn't us, that was Sophie. You have to sue Sophie. It doesn't wash like that. As a business, you have to take ownership. So as neurodiverse individuals, once you know the Equality Act, basically, once you know that inside out, upside down, you shouldn't have to know the law yourself, but once you know, you can better arm yourself and be going to business. And actually people need educating to know that I'm not being rude when I'm very direct. There's no malice in that. You're not going to get any fluff out of me. I'm just saying it like it is. I'm not being rude.
Yeah, and I think Lisa added that the recent experience came to her from her line manager, So raising it with them was not an option. What can people do in that situation? I guess other than identifying who in the organization they can escalate it to, but a lot of businesses now, HR is kind of rolled into a few roles.
Yeah.
So,
and everybody's business is going to be very, very different. The other thing you can do is there's a great new initiative that's been set up called Neurodiversity in Business, set up by Dan Harris. So it may well be worth linking and having a conversation with him, because he's certainly got lots of contacts who are volunteering for free to support individuals work through this nightmare of legislation and red tape.
is that neurodiversityinbusiness.org? I've got a website here that I can pop in the chat box. There you go. Amazing. And then Richard just adds that he had a similar experience with his ADHD daughter at university. He had to make the point that if she had any support, she could achieve as well as any other student. For example, like someone needing glasses to read. So that is, yeah, that's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Brilliant. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to drop them in the box. But if not, thank you so much for joining. Oh, Richard has just added, as a designer, I'm particularly interested in understanding, are there common behaviours within neurodiverse communities that are not being accommodated for in website design generally? Oh, so
that could be a whole podcast on its own there, Richard. I love that. Of course, there are always things there, but there's, when we think of inclusion, it's inclusion for everybody. I had no idea that, and LinkedIn is usually pretty good for being inclusive, but with hashtags, if you don't actually put a capital letter between each word in a hashtag, so if we were to put Thrive Best Webinar or something like that, if there weren't any capital letters between each word, a screen reader can't read it. So it's tiny little things like that. It's keeping your fonts legible, making sure that screen readers can read your content. And I know Thrive's own website is having an overhaul to make it more inclusive. So that's probably in itself, I might do a whole new webinar on that, to be fair, Richard. So
I think yeah, that sounds great. And I know, like, obviously I design the social media graphics and stuff for Thrive, so bearing in mind things like fonts is really important. I know that, is it sans serif fonts are much more accessible to read. Things like Open Sans are very neurodiverse friendly, using certain colors behind text and stuff as well. But yeah, this sounds like a great topic. So yeah,
any more webinar suggestions? Let's go.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us for your lunch break. I'm going to pop the registration link again in the chat box for the next one. That's on the 31st of August. So if you aren't jetting off anywhere exotic, then we'd love to see you at the next one. And yeah, have a great Wednesday afternoon. Thanks so much, Chezzy. You've been amazing. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. Zoom wave.
Yeah, Zoom wave.